So this problem, I need to get common denominators. I'm going to start by factoring the first denominator, so then that way I'm dealing with factors. So x squared plus 5x minus 24 is x and x, and then the two numbers that multiply to be negative 24 and add up to be 5 are a positive 8 and a negative 3. And so that's the denominator that I'm going to be focusing on. When it comes to building the least common denominator, I need an x plus 8, and I need an x minus 3, and then the x minus 3 is already accounted for, so the least common denominator is x plus 8 times x minus 3. So that's what I'm going to rewrite each fraction as having a denominator of. Notice that this is subtraction, it stays subtraction, so x plus 8 times x minus 3. So when I look at the first fraction and I decide what are they missing in the denominator, what do I need to multiply by, the answer is nothing. They're not missing anything. So technically I can multiply by 1, but it's not going to change the numerator. And then in the second fraction, what they're missing is the quantity x plus 8. So I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the quantity x plus 8. So I'm going to distribute the 3. So I get 3x plus 24. Now you have a couple of options here. You can decide that you just want to be careful with your subtraction, or you can change this into an addition problem and distribute the negative. As long as you make sure that that negative applies to not only the 3x, but also the 24. So then I add fractions, so the denominators stay the same, or subtract fractions depending, x plus 8, x minus 3. And it's typical to write it in standard form, so I would put a negative 3x, and then 12 minus 24, 12 plus a negative 24 is minus 12. So I would say there's nothing wrong with this answer. I think it might be more typical to factor out a negative at the very least, and in this case a negative 3, and get the quantity x plus 4, like this. But again, because nothing cancels, the numerator is okay. And then it would tell you that x cannot equal negative 8 and that x cannot equal 3 because the denominator can't be 0. But again, I think you're just going to see that, and I want you to know what it means as opposed to having to come up with it yourself. Okay, so then number 9 says x plus 2 over x minus 4 minus 2 over x plus 5x over 3x minus 1. So here's how I would recommend doing this problem. If you've got 3 separate fractions, I would start with the first 2. Or I guess you can pick the 2 that look easiest. But I would start with the first 2. I'd get common denominators, and then I'd incorporate the third one. So the first 2, the denominators are the quantity x minus 4 and then just x. And so with just the first 2, the least common denominator is x minus 4 times x. And it's standard to see the x first. It's not wrong if you put it on the other side. So I'm going to rewrite each of the first 2 fractions as having a denominator of x times x minus 4. So what is the first fraction missing? An x. So I am going to distribute the x to both terms. So that's x squared plus 2x. And then what is the second term missing? It's missing the quantity x minus 4. So I've got the quantity x minus 4. So I distribute that and get 2x minus 8. So when it comes to combining like terms, you are welcome to just make sure that you subtract the 2x and subtract the negative 8, or you can change this to an addition problem and make it a negative 2x and a positive 8. So the denominator is x times x minus 4, and then x squared, 2x minus 2x is nothing, and then plus 8. So far that is the first 2 fractions, and then I'm going to bring down that I'm adding 5x over 3x minus 1. And I'm actually going to rewrite this on my next slide, so then that way I have more room to work. So x squared plus 8 over x times x minus 4 plus 5x over 3x minus 1. Okay, so now when it comes to building the least common denominator, I need an x, I need a quantity x minus 4, and I need a quantity 3x minus 1. So the entire denominator is all three of those things. So what is the first fraction missing? It's missing a 3x minus 1. So I'm going to take 3x minus 1, and off to the side here, I'm going to take 3x minus 1 times x squared plus 8. And so I'm going to go in order. I've got 3x times x squared, which is 3x to the third, and then I've got a 24x minus x squared minus 8. So when I write that over here, I'm going to put it in standard form. 3x to the third minus x squared plus 24x minus 8. And then in the second fraction, I'm looking at what am I missing in the denominator, and I'm missing both an x and an x minus 4. So I need to multiply by an x and an x minus 4. And so I'm going to take 5x times x minus 4. So I'm going to start 5x times x is 5x squared, and then times x minus 4. So I get 5x to the third minus 20x squared. So in this numerator, I get 5x to the third minus 20x squared. And then I combine like terms. So I'm going to erase this here. When I go to write my fraction, the denominator stays this whole big mess. And I combine like terms. 3 plus 5 is 8. X to the third, negative 1 minus 20 is minus 21. X squared. And then plus 24x